Discover the amazing world before Pangea. Unveiling 200 million years of hidden wonders. Lucy Thompson's heart raced at the words printed on the flyer she had just discovered in the depths of Madison High's teacher lounge. It promised revelations beyond her wildest dreams, hidden wonders waiting to ignite imaginations, perhaps even her own. But with that excitement came a familiar weight, the sensation of being overshadowed. At 32, her life had lodged in a rut, despite her undying passion for science. She often felt like an afterthought in her own classroom, blending into the walls, little more than a shadow among the vibrant youth bustling around her. In the weeks leading up to the flyer's unveiling, Lucy had unearthed something extraordinary deep in the forest of fossil site, ripe with the echoes of an age before Pangea. Her hands trembled as she brushed the earth from the delicate relics, a legacy from her grandfather, who had ignited her childhood with dreams of dinosaurs and ancient worlds, now nestled within her grasp. But as exhilaration coursed through her, so too did a sense of impending doom. What if no one took her seriously? What if the nearby university, her own educational nemesis, scoffed at her humble origins and dismissed her discoveries? The thoughts nagged at her, unrelenting shadows in her mind. Each time she faced her students, she could feel their eyes glancing over her, resolute only when they sought entertainment or validation elsewhere. Did they even notice her attempts to inspire? Fear gnawed away at any confidence she had managed to muster. She longed to break free from the cycle of invisibility, to find her place among the celebrated educators whose names were etched on plaques and banners, all while struggling against the whisper of self-doubt that echoed her colleagues' shared ridicule. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But then the golden opportunity arrived. A wealthy investor, their eyes gleaming with potential, expressed interest in funding an exhibition of her fossils. Fame shimmered tantalizingly close, yet Lucy felt the full weight of her integrity bearing down upon her. Would her willingness to embrace this fortune sell out the very values she held dear? The tension between ambition and community loyalty pulled at her like the strings of a fragile kite caught in a relentless gale. She envisioned her students, their potential locked within the same woeful struggles that wrapped around her soul. Out of desperation and longing, she sought counsel from an aging mentor, a renowned paleontologist with ties to her grandfather's legacy. Each conversation served as a balm for her nerves, igniting the once bright dream that lay dormant. But as the days pressed on, deceit began to weave its way into her plans. Sinister whispers harbored by those who envied her ambition and disregarded her intelligence. Standing on the precipice of unveiling both her discoveries and her identity to the world, uncertainty tightened its grip around her heart. Would they bury her work under smirks, or would her journey from obscurity lead to the recognition she craved? Every tick of the clock echoed the doubts in her mind, leaving Lucy teetering on the edge of a decision that could shatter her dreams or propel her into an unforeseen legacy. The moment of truth loomed, the audience's breathless anticipation mirroring her own racing pulse. Would she unveil the ancient wonders, or would the shadows of self-doubt claim her? The day of the unveiling arrived, cloaked in an electric atmosphere that intensified Lucy's anxiety. She stood backstage of the small auditorium, where an audience of students, parents, and faculty awaited her presentation. The spotlight blazed against her skin, yet within, she felt a frigid grip of doubt constricting her breath. What if they turned their backs on her work? What if all these months of preparation unraveled into ridicule? She could almost hear the whispers. Just another failed attempt. Who does she think she is? The memories of scorn from her colleagues echoed in her ears, lifelike specters that clawed at her confidence. With every passing second, the dread mounted, and her pulse quickened in sync with the anxious ticking clock. This was her moment, yet the pressure felt like a vice. As she stepped onto the stage, The harsh light created silhouettes of the audience, ambiguous and distant. Her eyes flickered around the room, searching for familiar faces, those of her students, hoping to draw strength from their youthful exuberance. In their gaze, she sought not just acceptance but validation. Words began to form at her lips, but a whisper of self-doubt cautioned her to retreat. Forgetting was not an option. She had to confront this fear, for herself, but also for her students. With a deep breath, she initiated the presentation. The initial slides showcased breathtaking images of the fossils, each curated to illustrate the majesty of a world before Pangea. Slowly, she began to speak about her discoveries, her voice trembling at first but gaining strength as she forged a connection with the audience. The words flowed like a river breaking through a dam, filled with the excitement of what she had unearthed. As she progressed, she noticed a shift in the audience's demeanor. The murmurs of skepticism faded, replaced by rapt attention. Her students leaned forward, intrigue lighting up their faces. It was as if they were seeing an entirely new version of her, a visionary rather than a mere teacher lost behind the curriculum. In that moment, something clicked. Lucy resolved to push further, sharing her grandfather's legacy, the thrill of discovery that had woven itself into the fabric of her identity. She recalled her days spent at the excavation site, each fossil a testimony to the eons that had passed. The richness of her passion began to envelop the room, as she spoke not just of science, but of dreams deferred and the bravery required to pursue one's calling. The more she revealed, the more she ignited the spark within each listener's, stories intertwined with facts, a narrative etched with courage and vulnerability. It transformed the presentation into an experience, a journey rather than a lecture. She was no longer just Lucy Thompson, the overlooked educator. She became the embodiment of resilience, someone who had beaten the odds in pursuit of her dreams. But just as applause erupted at the conclusion, a voice from the back sliced through the applause, a familiar face, one of her critics from the faculty, laced with skepticism and intent on appending her triumph. "But, Lucy, how do you justify the scientific merit of your discoveries? What evidence do you have? Surely this is just an amateur attempt masquerading as serious research." Sudden uncertainty surged anew, her confidence tested. No longer merely a shadow, she faced the embodiment of her fears. Yet a flicker of resolve ignited within her. Maybe this was not solely about her. Maybe it was an opportunity to showcase that passion and dedication could transcend skepticism. In that moment, she recognized her fight was not just against the disdain of those who doubted her, but also against the lingering uncertainties within. Would she shrink back, allowing the shadows to claim her triumph? Or would she confront the challenge head-on, harnessing it to propel her further? The decision loomed like a thunderous wave on the horizon, one that could either drown her aspirations or sweep her into new realms of possibility. The stage was hers again, but the battle was far from over. What would she choose to become? The echo of her critic's voice seemed to pulse through the auditorium, commanding the attention of every listener. Lucy's heart raced as uncertainty mingled with determination. She felt the weight of those doubts pressing against her resolve, but instead of retreating, she dug deeper within herself. This was more than just a defense of her work. This was a moment for her evolution, a reckoning with all that had shaped her journey. Gathering her composure, she looked directly at her detractor. "You want evidence?" Instead of the panic that had previously seized her, a newfound confidence emerged. "Let's talk about the data. Each fossil isn't just a fragment. It's a narrative. When you look closely, you see the evolution of life, the adaptations to shifting environments. The context and stratigraphy of each find reveal a continuous story that spans millions of years." With each word, she felt the collective energy of the room shift, students nodding, parents whispering in approval. It was invigorating to no longer be a mere spectator to her own narrative but the primary author, weaving not only the facts but her experiences, her fears, and her newfound strength into a cohesive whole. "What I have done isn't just science, it's an invitation to experience those ancient worlds, to connect our present with our distant past. Isn't that what education is meant to do?" Measuring her words carefully, She explored her vulnerability as a bridge rather than a barrier. Yes, I may be an amateur in this vast field, but my passion runs deep. Passion fuels discovery. It causes us to question, to challenge existing paradigms. The silence in the auditorium shifted. It morphed from skepticism to contemplation. Lucy could see the flicker of understanding igniting in the eyes of her audience. They were no longer merely passive observers. They had embarked on this journey with her. The atmosphere was charged, and every lingering doubt became a prompt to further engagement rather than a roadblock. But the fight wasn't over. Lucy understood that her detractor-esque skepticism was a reflection of a broader fear of change, of accepting that expertise doesn't solely reside in prestigious qualifications, but can thrive in the heart of someone driven by relentless curiosity and courage. Isn't it often the ones outside the confines of convention who find the most beautiful truths? She posed. As she continued, her voice grew stronger, each statement punctuated by the confirmations around her, the amazed expressions of her students, the slight nods from some faculty members who had, until then, looked away. The process of dismantling that layer of doubt had begun to resonate in the room. Yet she internalized the weight of danger in this breakthrough. Was she only delaying the clash until another day? What if her resolve faded when faced with future challenges? The very thought was unsettling, but she was discovering a profound truth within her. Strength was found not in never wavering but in the grind of perseverance against life's storms. Finally, she concluded with a statement that hung in the air like a challenge. Embrace the chance to explore, to question what we know and who we are. We must never think our capabilities are limited by our perceived expertise. With those final words, she felt the applause thunder around her, the walls resonating with newfound belief. Recognition washed over her, igniting the embers of ambition that had lain dormant. As she stepped down from the stage, exhilaration coursing through her, Lucy felt different. This moment marked a profound shift. She was no longer an underdog, grappling with self-doubt. She had emerged as a force of nature, willing to embrace both her strengths and weaknesses. But as she exited the auditorium, her heart still raced with trepidation. The taste of victory was sweet, yet she harbored a gnawing concern about the next challenge looming on her horizon. Would the same skepticism from her peers resurface when she attempted to take her findings to a wider audience? The academic world was more combative than she'd ever anticipated. That palpable fear lingered in the back of her mind as she walked away, fueling the next chapter of her journey, a journey that promised to test not only her discoveries, but the very essence of who she had become. The next challenge awaited, and Lucy was determined to confront it head-on. But first, she needed to make a decision about how to refine her research for the demanding standards ahead. What would her next move be? The sun hung low in the sky, casting elongated shadows over the research lab as Lucy sat between piles of notes and fossil samples. The exhilaration from her recent presentation had begun to wane, replaced by a formidable sense of urgency. She knew that the greater the exposure for her findings, the more significant the scrutiny would be. The ghost of her earlier confrontation haunted her, making her question whether her newfound confidence could withstand the academic gauntlet that awaited her. As she leafed through her notes, Lucy felt a pressing need to refine her methodology and support her findings with stronger evidence. The weight of expectation bore down on her. She dug deeper into her research, prepared to extract every necessary detail to fortify her arguments against the inevitable resistance she expected from her colleagues. The task loomed before her, colossal and daunting. Yet somewhere within her, a flicker of ambition ignited. It wasn't just about validation for her work. It was about wielding her passion as a weapon against that skepticism. She summoned the late-night hours she had spent studying, the endless debates with herself amid loose papers strewn across her desk. Every fossil she examined came with its own story, and she was determined to tell each one in vivid detail, bridging the gap between the ancient past and the present. She began to structure her findings. Lucy meticulously outlined her research while drawing connections between prehistoric climate changes and their implications on contemporary ecosystems. This interlinking of her findings felt like revelations unfolding before her. Here lay the heart of her work, showcasing the continuity of life rather than just isolated events. However, doubt hovered like a cloud, ready to break. What if this narrative twist failed to resonate with the stringent academic community? The claws of insecurity reached for her, threatening to pull her back into the abyss of self-doubt. In that moment, she paused, forcing herself to breathe through the anxiety. Only through confrontation can I grow, she reminded herself, her mind racing with the realization that authenticity in her work could invoke the very passion she had spoken of during her presentation. If she genuinely believed in her narrative, she needed to confront her fears and place that narrative before the world. Each time she wrote a new section, she felt her resolve strengthen. Lucy visualized her critics' faces, their narrowed eyes and skeptical brows. They might expect polished theories enriched with traditional data, but she offered them insight from a woman who had walked a different path. A path that connected her as a living entity to the dead past. Then, amidst this whirlwind of thought, the door swung open. Dr. Simmons, a recognized authority in paleontology, stepped into the lab. Lucy's heart quickened. Could he be here to evaluate her work? The tension stood palpable as they exchanged greetings. His reputation preceded him. He was known for his sharp critiques and thorough approach. "Lucy, I heard your presentation. It was unconventional," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching. She held her breath, waiting for the inevitable critique. He continued, "I must admit, your passion left an impression. But passion needs to be backed by rigorous research." A thread of determination coursed through her. "I agree, and that's precisely what I'm here to do," she replied, matching his gaze with confidence. Dr. Simmons raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Are you prepared to defend your own narrative against established beliefs?" "Absolutely," she stated, surprised by the assertiveness that lingered on her lips. As he gestured toward her notes, the world around her expanded. This could be an opportunity to extract further guidance, even criticism, but ultimately, it was Lucy's moment to shine and solidify her discoveries. As they discussed her research, Lucy felt the winds of uncertainty shift. But it dawned on her that the time had come to face her opponents not just in the physical sense, but the inner critics she battled daily. This looming confrontation with established norms pulsated in her veins as she prepared for the challenge that awaited her. Would she fortify her claims, or would the same fears that plagued her in the past reemerge? The possibility loomed heavy as the conversation continued, and Lucy's mind raced with a single thought: how to stay honest to her mission while navigating the treacherous waters of academia. She understood that this was more than an academic exercise. It was a test of her identity and her mission. The moment was at hand to confront not just her audience but herself. Would Lucy rise to the occasion, or would the weight of expectation prove too formidable? The tension grew palpable, and with every exchange, she felt her determination solidifying. As they wrapped up the discussion, she realized that she wasn't merely presenting her research. She was unveiling a part of her spirit. But could she navigate the rigorous terrain ahead, or would doubt reclaim its place in her narrative? The next challenge lay ahead. Lucy sat back after her conversation with Dr. Simmons, her heart racing yet her mind clearer than it had been in days. The realm of academia no longer felt like a cold, sterile chamber but a vibrant battleground for ideas. While she had anticipated Dr. Simmons' skepticism, his acknowledgement of her passion sparked a flicker of hope. The challenge ahead wasn't merely about validation. It was a quest for truth, a quest that had its roots deep within her. Rubbing her eyes, she recalled the endless hours she had spent charting her findings. While the data loomed over her like a daunting specter, it also provided structure. She needed to layer each piece of evidence meticulously, not just to protect her thesis but to illustrate a compelling narrative. It reminded her of the paleontology classes she'd taken, where each fossil was a piece of a grand puzzle waiting to be assembled. With renewed fervor, she opened new files on her computer, organizing her notes like a symphony conductor guiding an orchestra. Each section found its place in her overarching narrative, intertwining theoretical analysis with tangible evidence. However, the pressure mounted. Each paragraph needed to resonate not just with clarity, but with emotional weight. Could she achieve this balance? Motivated and slightly frantic, Lucy booted up the old projector she occasionally used for visual representations. Images of the ancient world flickered on the screen: dense ferns, vast swamps, creatures both familiar and bizarre. The visuals brought to life the concepts she was trying to communicate, fueling her belief that the world of paleontology was not merely scientific. It was a tapestry that mingled history with humanity's very essence. Deep down, she knew her audience wouldn't just be her colleagues. They would be the silent critics who had cast shadows over her dreams. While Lucy focused on crafting a powerful narrative, her mind wandered to those critics. How would she engage with someone who dismissed her work based on rigid conventions? What would it feel like to confront their doubt directly? As she poured herself another cup of coffee, a surge of anxiety washed over her. This battle she had chosen felt increasingly personal. The thought of them refuting her insights did more than ignite her defiance. It invoked self-doubt. What if she failed? What if she couldn't stand her ground? But failure would no longer define her. Instead of shying away from dissent, she contemplated how she could use it as a springboard. What if she anticipated their criticisms? If she could visualize their arguments, she could prepare her counterpoints. An internal voice told her that if she could anticipate their questioning, she could confront her own fears. It felt like preparing for an inevitable storm. If she was equipped, perhaps she could ride the waves instead of being capsized. With a deep breath, she opened a new document, anticipated criticisms and counterarguments. Each point that came to mind was accompanied by her own findings, reinforcing her stance. This process was freeing. What had felt like a weight became a collection of potential dialogues, moments where her passion and data could interlace. A sharp knock at the door jolted her back to reality. It was Dr. Simmons again, this time with a colleague in tow, Dr. Fukushima, a noted skeptic against narratives merging data with personal interpretation. Heart-pounding, Lucy forced herself to focus. This wasn't merely an unexpected visit. It was an opportunity for unfiltered engagement. "Lucy, we have a few hours," Dr. Simmons said, gesturing for them to sit. "I thought we could have a more in-depth discussion on your methodology." The moment stretched before her, a chasm of both fear and excitement. The confrontation she had contemplated was at her doorstep. Would she rise to meet it or retreat into her own uncertainties? As they settled in, her mind raced. This was the moment she had prepared for, but as she opened her mouth to begin her explanation, the enormity of what was at stake pulled at her resolve. Would her newfound approach withstand the scrutiny of established beliefs? As their conversation unfolded, she felt the air thicken with possibilities. How would Lucy navigate this critical juncture where her passion met the cold, hard scrutiny of academia? The atmosphere was charged with tension, with futures hanging in the balance. Lucy took a moment to gather her thoughts as Dr. Simmons and Dr. Fukushima exchanged glances, both clearly assessing her. Their anticipation only heightened the tension in the air. This was a crucial moment, and she could feel the weight of every detail she had meticulously prepared hovering like a shimmering veil over the discussion. She cleared her throat, her pulse racing. "Thank you for coming, Dr. Simmons, Dr. Fukushima. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss my thesis." A rush of determination washed over her as she launched into the fundamental concepts of her work. She cited foundational theories, weaving in her hypotheses while making bold claims about the connection between ancient climates and shifts in biodiversity. Dr. Simmons nodded encouragingly, his familiar demeanor offering her a sense of stability amid the storm of self-doubt. But Dr. Fukushima's pinched expression remained unchanged. As she presented her findings, Lucy felt a growing awareness of his scrutiny. It could easily devolve into disbelief or disbelief disguised as critique. She recalled the critiques she had anticipated and wove them seamlessly into her presentation. Regarding the assumption that emotional narratives dilute scientific accuracy, she said, "I argue that intertwining personal engagement fosters deeper connections to the data. When we understand the why behind the facts, we can evoke powerful questions that propel our fields forward." Dr. Fukushima tapped his pen against his notepad, an unsettling rhythm that signaled challenge. A compelling narrative does not inherently make a conclusion valid. Lucy, you must ensure that your argument is robust enough to stand against the skepticism inherent to our discipline. A bead of sweat trickled down Lucia's back as the rush of adrenaline thinned her skin. This was the exact moment of confrontation she had prepared for, yet her initial confidence faltered. Remembering her own reflections, she straightened her posture and met his gaze head-on. I appreciate that point, Dr. Fukushima. However, I believe the rigidity of traditional frameworks can stifle innovative research. Embracing a dynamic narrative style can be the bridge we need to allow for creativity within our analytical constructs. The intensity of his stare irritated her, but she pressed on, refusing to allow her apprehensions to drown her convictions. With every word, she dissected his objections, linking them back to her findings and spinning them into opportunities for engagement rather than confrontation. Dr. Simmons smiled subtly as it became clear that Lucy was veering into uncharted territories of argumentation. If I may interject, Dr. Simmons said, a thoughtful cadence to his voice. Lucy, it seems you're suggesting that perhaps narrative can be a form of evidence itself? A thrill coursed through her. She hadn't anticipated that avenue of questioning, and it felt liberating. Exactly. By integrating narrative elements, we acknowledge the multifaceted nature of how we interpret data. It's an avenue for fostering empathy, a crucial component often overlooked in our analysis. The conversation shifted, and Lucy began to sense a change in Dr. Fukushima. His defensive posture softened ever so slightly. While he still wore skepticism on his sleeve, he leaned in, becoming more engaged than dismissive. Yet, as the dialogue deepened, a gnawing awareness crept into Lucy's mind. The battle ahead was more than a simple skirmish over methodologies. This was a test of her resilience, her ability to stand firm amid skepticism. Was her voice truly powerful enough to carve a new path through the dense foliage of academia? Could she redefine the narrative for professionals chained to rigid constructs? As the discussion progressed, Lucy held onto her growing realization that the purpose of her journey extended beyond proving her thesis. It was a deeper exploration into her own intellectual capabilities, a testament to her evolving identity as both a scholar and an advocate for change within her field. While she deftly navigated the questions, Lucy felt a swell of confidence. Each reciprocal response ignited her passion further, sharpening her insights with layered complexity. As they reached an inevitable pause, silence mingled with the weight of potential. Dr. Fukushima raised an eyebrow, his expression a careful blend of guardedness and curiosity. So, Lucy, if you truly believe in this narrative framework, how do you plan to address the counterarguments, especially with the more entrenched scholars at the upcoming symposium? Her breath caught in her throat as the challenge loomed, sharper than any question that had come before. This was no longer about her thesis, it was about her integrity as a researcher, the much larger implications of her work, and the authenticity she carried forward into an unforgiving academic landscape. This critical juncture could redefine her standing. Would she retreat or blaze ahead? How would Lucy turn the tides against the prevailing skepticism to emerge not just as a defender of her work, but as a guiding force for others daring to tread in narrative waters? Lucy sat quietly, the question echoing in her mind, tethering her thoughts to the weight of its implication. The upcoming symposium loomed like a specter, a vast stage where the academic elite would dissect her every word. Would she stand strong against the daunting presence of conventional scholars who preferred their rigid frameworks? Would she match their certainty with her own belief in the transformative power of narrative? The moment felt suspended in time. She could almost hear her heart thundering, a reminder of the stakes before her. A flicker of doubt threatened to dim her newfound confidence. Still, she could also feel the fire of determination pulsing within her veins. I plan to engage with them by proactively addressing their concerns, she spoke, gradually finding strength in her own voice. The symposium is not just an opportunity for me to present my research, but a chance to foster dialogue. I want to invite their critiques instead of shying from them, transforming opposition into conversation. That's how we can all grow. Dr. Simmons nodded, impressed, while Dr. Fukushima's expression remained inscrutable. Still, Lucy detected the slightest hint of curiosity flickering behind his critically sharp facade. But how, Lucy? Dr. Fukushima leaned in, apparently drawn in by her clarity. How do you plan to combat their deep-rooted skepticism? Academia is slow to adapt, often resistant to new paradigms. This was at the heart of her challenge. The academic world required not just the best data, but innovative ways to translate findings into compelling narratives. She could feel a sensation of clarity forming in her mind, drawing threads from her earlier explorations. This is precisely where my methodological strength lies, she stated, a spark igniting as her thoughts crystallized. By integrating robust evidence with narrative, I can illustrate not just the what, but the why, how ecological shifts resonate on a human level. She paused, choosing her words with intention, seeking to instill confidence, even in the face of skepticism. If I can make the science relatable, then it's easier for them to reconsider their views. A shared narrative could break down their barriers. Dr. Simmons raised an eyebrow, a flicker of approval in his eyes. And what if that narrative does not resonate? What if it falls flat among the scholarly elite? The backlash could be severe. Doubt clawed at her once more, burrowing deep. A sharp breath caught in her throat, and she realized the weight of a potential failure threatened to smother her resolve. Would her attempts at fostering connection and empathy lead only to ridicule? I will prepare for that. I'll research their arguments, anticipate their questions, and confront them directly, she ensured, her voice firm. Knowledge itself can be empowering. If I can equip myself with their criticisms, my responses will be grounded in understanding rather than fear. As Lucy spoke, she felt a shift within herself. Fear transformed into a yearning to champion an evolved academic discourse. She was not merely defending her thesis. She was stewarding a burgeoning idea, a narrative that bridged science and emotion, theory and empathy. Each new layer of insight fortified her ambition. But more than that, she added, a fierce conviction stabbing through her uncertainties. Even if I face opposition, I will not lose sight of my purpose. There is too much at stake for us to stand still in our academic silos. Dr. Fukushima leaned back, a contemplative expression settling over him. Lucy could interpret this as either skepticism or unexpected consideration. She knew better than to take it lightly. This man's opinions could elevate or sabotage her burgeoning aspirations. As the meeting drew to a close, Lucy felt a shift within her, a concrete resolve taking the place of wavering doubts. It was a critical step toward carving not just her niche within the field but also towards championing new paradigms. Leaving the office, she grasped the papers clinging to her thesis as though they were lifelines, fragile yet full. A promise. There were still many hurdles to overcome, including those remaining weeks before the symposium. Could she truly transform the apprehension of her colleagues into alliances? How would her first encounter with her critics unfold? The looming possibility of confrontation sent a shiver of both dread and excitement coursing through her. Each step away from the building became a preface to the uncertainties ahead. What lay at the forefront of her academic journey was more than just a defense of her ideas. It was a quest for understanding within a fractured system, a pursuit that could challenge centuries of entrenched ideologies. Yet, could a single voice be powerful enough to shift the tide of an entire field? That question burned in her mind, now more urgent than ever. As Lucy stepped into the warm embrace of late afternoon sun, she felt a mix of exhilaration and unease, the light amplifying the uncertainty coursing through her. She had a plan, the outlines of her presentation were coming together, but the fear of failure still loomed large in her thoughts. The symposium wasn't merely an academic milestone. It was a crucible for her ideas, a test of her ability to foster discussions that might reshape misunderstandings about climate narratives. She glanced at her watch, realizing she had a couple of hours until her next meeting with Dr. Simmons. Instead of returning to her cluttered office, she decided to take a walk through the nearby botanical garden. The vibrant colors and fragrant blossoms provided a stark contrast to the rigorous atmosphere of academia. Yet, within that peaceful setting, she couldn't escape the gnawing pressure to prove herself. Taking a deep breath, she wandered along the meandering paths, letting her mind drift to the critics she would face. It was daunting to think about confronting established scholars who clung tightly to tradition, their skepticism a formidable wall. But then she recalled her intention to turn that very skepticism into dialogue. Her heart swelled with resolve. She was not merely a challenger but a bridge builder, eager to connect dissonant ideas. Watching a group of children enthusiastically pointing at a butterfly, she was struck by a realization. Children weren't bound by academia. Their questions were raw, authentic, and frequently illuminating. They approached the world with wonder, unafraid to inquire and to explore the why and how of everything around them. In a rush of inspiration, she began to envision her presentation not as a defensive stand but as an invitation. If she could channel that childlike curiosity, she could draw in her audience rather than alienate them. That thought ignited a pivotal shift in her strategy. Instead of focusing solely on data, she would frame her findings within a story, a narrative that made complex science relatable. She envisioned her audience captivated by the tale of Earth's evolution, a story told through the eyes of both scientist and layperson, bringing everyone into a shared experience. As she returned to her office, she felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted. The inferno of doubt simmered, replaced by a determined clarity. Sacrifices and late nights loomed in her future, but they now appeared as necessary investments rather than burdens. In her office, surrounded by stacks of research papers, Lucy set to work. She scoured academic journals for opposing viewpoints, readying herself to address them preemptively. Each piece of criticism she encountered served not to dissuade her but to sharpen her arguments. She smiled, recognizing the shift in her approach. Rather than avoiding confrontation, she was now seeking it out, welcoming the debate as a stepping stone to greater understanding. But then, just as she was feeling invigorated by this newfound drive, her phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Simmons halted her thoughts. He had arranged for a mock presentation in a few days with some of their most critical peers. Panic momentarily clawed at her chest. What if they were as dismissive as she feared? Could she hold her ground against them? As she took a deep breath, she realized that fear was part of the process. The upcoming mock presentation would be another opportunity to test her ideas in a less forgiving environment. Instead of seeing it as a threat, she decided to view it as crucial feedback, a chance to refine her narrative before the larger audience awaited her. Bracing herself for this new challenge, she flexed her fingers and dove into her work with a renewed sense of urgency. Could this mock presentation be the testing ground that transforms her vision into reality? With each keystroke and every revised sentence, she narrowed her focus. What was on the line was not just her thesis but the potential to alter how people perceived ecological narratives. The time had come to transform her fears into action, to face the very obstacles that sought to hinder her growth. The question hung delicately in the air. Was she ready to confront not just her critics, but her own limitations? The answer sparked a deep curiosity within her, pushing her to wonder how far she could really go if she embraced the challenge ahead. Lucy knew the forthcoming mock presentation would be a turning point, a definitive moment that could either solidify her resolve or unravel her tightly woven aspirations. Lucy spent the next few days consumed by her preparations. Time blurred as her focus sharpened. The once intimidating deadlines morphed into stepping stones. She meticulously crafted her narrative, interweaving facts with anecdotes, ensuring that her passion for the subject shone through. Focusing on engaging language, she envisioned her audience leaning in, captivated by the story of Earth not just as a life-sustaining rock but as a dynamic stage where every character from the smallest microbe to colossal dinosaurs played a role in a narrative that was still unfolding. As she recited her lines in the mirror, Lucy noticed subtle changes within herself. The tremors of doubt that used to accompany her rehearsals replaced by an unwavering sense of purpose. In their place arose a fierce determination. She began to understand that her worth wasn't tied solely to the opinions of her peers, but rooted in her commitment to contribute meaningfully to the dialogue surrounding climate narratives. Just when she felt she was gaining momentum, the reality of the mock presentation loomed larger. Days seemed to stretch unbearably as she awaited that moment. A nagging thought nagged at her. Was she really prepared for those critical eyes? She had spent hours calculating potential questions, mapping out responses to anticipated challenges. Each time she probed her own understanding, she discovered gaps that demanded attention. Late one night, as she absorbed one last paper, something clicked. A concept emerged, a hidden angle neither she nor her competitors had explored. It was a nuanced point that, if articulated clearly, could resonate deeply with her audience. The thrill of discovery fired her imagination, compelling her to dive deeper and refine her arguments further. She lost track of time, the outside world fading as she engaged with her notes. This was no longer merely about proving herself. It was about sharing a shared understanding of the planet, a revelation of interconnectedness, forged not through competition but through collaboration. With every paragraph she crafted, Lucy felt herself evolving, gaining a confidence rooted in knowledge and authenticity. However, there remained an inherent tension. The days leading up to the presentation were mentally taxing, filled with self-doubt that whispered incessantly, "What if it isn't enough?" Each time she stood to rehearse, she'd get swept away in the myriad of what-ifs. The urge to retreat into a shell threatened to overtake her, but rather than succumb, she confronted these insecurities by sharing her presentation with her closest friends. They provided constructive feedback, helping her to refine her language further, and offered encouragement that buoyed her spirits. Yet, despite their praise, a deeper fear lingered. Critics had the power to dismantle her carefully designed arguments with a single comment or question. The thought made her stomach churn. The night before the mock presentation, sleeplessness wrapped around her tighter than any blanket, causing an internal restlessness that mirrored the anxiety gnawing at her confidence. She tossed and turned, replaying her carefully designed narrative and visualizing the impending critiques. What if they were merciless? What if her thoughts came out wrong? Would they challenge her ideas not out of malice but simply due to their attachment to established norms? At that moment, Lucy made a decision. She would embrace the fear rather than let it paralyze her. She grabbed her notepad and began writing down affirmations, articulating her belief in the importance of dialogue, how essential discomfort was for true understanding. She reminded herself that every great thinker faced such resistance. Finally, as dawn broke, she fell asleep amidst a riot of thoughts, feeling resolute for the first time in days. As the light crept into her room, she awoke with an invigorated spirit. The day she had both dreaded and yearned for had arrived. Little did she know, the very presentation meant to forge her path forward was destined to unravel the truths buried far deeper both within her work and herself. Would this confrontation with her peers lead her to new revelations, or would old fears rise to choke her voice? The next few hours would determine everything. How far was she willing to explore the unknown? Lucy stood backstage of the auditorium, her breathing shallow, heart racing wildly as she prepared for the moment that had seemingly stretched into eternity. The mock presentation loomed ahead like a mountain, towering and intimidating. Yet, as she glanced at the audience waiting in hushed anticipation, a sense of empowerment surged within her. Today was not just about defending her research. It was her statement of purpose, a declaration of her rightful place within the scholarly community. With each step toward the podium, she recalled the numerous hours spent harvesting data and refining her narrative. Confidence surged through her as she navigated those moments of doubt, each meticulously collected fossil symbolizing her dedication and reverence for the science she loved. She could feel her grandfather's presence, urging her on, echoing the dreams he had fostered in her while she was still a girl. As Lucy's eyes scanned the audience, she witnessed a mix of skepticism and curiosity among her colleagues. Dr. Simmons sat nearby, offering an encouraging nod, while Dr. Fukushima maintained a neutral expression, ready to strike when she presented her findings. With a deep breath, she stepped forward and began. The words flowed like a tide, garnering momentum. She layered scientific evidence seamlessly with captivating narratives, illustrating ancient ecosystems and initiations that mirrored contemporary issues. As she spoke, she watched her audience's faces shift from disinterest to engagement. They were leaning in, intrigued, waking from the slumber of their rigid academic presuppositions. Throughout this journey, she articulated, "I have come to understand that narratives are not just embellishments. They are essential to making science accessible." She felt exhilarated, witnessing her audience connect with her words on more than just an intellectual level. It was emotional, weaving a bond between the ancient past and present, allowing the audience to visualize the interconnectedness of life through time. However, as she reached the crux of her work, Dr. Fukushima raised a hand, curiosity etched upon his brow. "Lucy," he started, "fair yet challenging, how do you reconcile the need for empirical rigor with this narrative style of interpretation?" The question hung in the air, and immediately, she felt her heart rate spike. This was her moment of potential vulnerability. Yet, instead of faltering, she welcomed the challenge. "Thank you for this vital question, Dr. Fukushima. The fusion of narrative with empirical data is not merely an act of storytelling. It's a method of engaging the mind and heart simultaneously. I have presented layers of evidence that connect my findings with broader ecological implications moving beyond mere numbers." Pushing past her worry, she depicted the scientific process through a relatable lens, reminding her colleagues that understanding the planet's history involved both data and emotional investment. The unexpected clarity that accompanied her response struck a chord, and she pressed on, buoyed by her own conviction. Lucy had come to realize that the academic world needed not only substantiated evidence but also passionate storytellers willing to bridge gaps. As the atmosphere shifted palpably in her favor, she recognized the pivotal transformation within herself. The shadow of doubt that had previously haunted her began to dissipate. Confidence surged through her veins, a firm foundation upon which she stood. As she finished her presentation, applause erupted, echoing warmly against the walls. She felt herself smiling a beaming, genuine smile, one she hadn't worn in months. In that moment, she was no longer merely the overlooked educator. She had asserted herself as a viable contributor to the scientific narrative. There was no denying it. She had achieved clarity not just in her research but in her identity. But the most gratifying recognition came when Dr. Simmons approached her afterward, his expression reflective. "You've opened a door for a constructive dialogue that our community desperately needs, Lucy. Well done." A swell of pride surged through her, anchoring her in the reality of her transformation. She no longer stood merely in defense of her findings. She had established herself as a thought leader. She had conquered the limitations of self-doubt and emerged recognizable not only to her peers but, most importantly, to herself. Lucy took a deep breath, a serene calm enveloping her. She had risen to the challenge, defied expectations, and transformed her narrative into an invitation for understanding. As she surveyed the room, she realized that she had indeed forged her identity as a scientist and educator, woven intricately through the fabric of passion and resilience. With a final glance at her colleagues, she felt gratitude warm her heart. They had become part of her story, one of growth, of embracing challenges, and carving out a space for her voice. Today marked not just a milestone in her academic journey, but the dawn of an unbreakable spirit, ready to explore whatever lay ahead. As Lucy left the auditorium, a renewed sense of purpose flowed through her. She was no longer a shadow in her own narrative, but the vivid protagonist of her story, equipped to inspire others. Now was the moment to invite the world into this newfound journey. If you believe in transformative journeys just like Lucy's, you need to subscribe now to the channel to catch our next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support these vivid narratives that uplift and inspire. Comment your reactions and theories about this compelling conclusion. You have a voice, and we want to hear it. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this empowering conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. These stories matter. Your support is crucial.